ready to go here? All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the regular Housing and Redevelopment meeting for August 15th at 7 p.m. And our first item is open forum. Each speaker is to keep their comment period to 3 minutes to allow sufficient time for others. Comments are to be an opportunity to address the HRA. Please refer to the HRA agenda and minutes webpage for additional ways to submit comments. You may also call 612-861-9764 or email ldubois@richfieldmin.gov with questions. Call into the open forum by dialing 1-415-655-0001, and all of that should be on the screen. And you use webinar access code 2461-947-9457 and password 1234. Executive Director Paleman, did anyone submit any comments ahead of time?
Chair Supple, we did not receive any comments.
All right, and if I'm understanding the screen correctly, no one is currently waiting to speak to us. Is there anyone here in person that wishes to speak? All right, so if you could proceed to the microphone and tell us your name and address.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. My name is Ruane Onesi Rosa, 4421 West 65th Street. This is a part of a letter that I addressed to candidates for who are running the primary, the city council. I just want to read a portion of it out. What concerns me most are activities undertaken by the City of Richfield and by its Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Our tax dollars have been used to purchase family-sized plots of land and to then sell these plots to developers or to investment companies, thereby transferring ownership of land from residents to conglomerates. Under these circumstances, it seems quite possible that one day Richfield's land could belong to foreign investors, as land deals change hands at the stroke of a key upon a keyboard, handing ownership over to those who are not governed by the laws of the United States. I also observe a trend towards outside ownership when conglomerates pose as local realtors who are altogether too willing to purchase houses, land, no matter the condition of the structure upon that land. I think vigilance is called for when very shoddy structures are put together with toothpicks and toilet paper that stand out upon the landscape like marshmallows, replacing solid homes, personal histories, constructed and owned by Richfield residents whose fortunes were and are tied to the land and to the laws of the United States. I'll skip that paragraph. I would like to know who owns our mega-storied complexes today. In addition to City Hall, who else is buying up plots of land under the guise that we buy ugly, etc.? I do not believe that Tom and Sally are going to sell these properties to Al and Jane. I believe ugly buyers are serving conglomerate interests which have very little to do with the rights of you and of me to own land in Richfield. From my perspective, Richfield City Council became way too involved in rerouting streets, in rezoning, and in modifying the comprehensive plan so as to serve the interests of conglomerates rather than the interests of its constituency. In my neighborhood, pressures were exerted as council members and mayors stood hand in hand with investors and developers. Residents were encouraged to vacate their homes, most of whom had absolutely no desire to move. Their former properties fell to conglomerate interests. As Oregon forests were burning up, Richfield land was being disemboweled of many large, long-standing oaks. A stately property of historical significance was demolished. 7 structures, one of which have housed an elderly gentleman of East Indian origin, whose family resided there a good many years, were destroyed. Additionally, there were 2 residences which were housed by families of Latin origin. Another was a home of a woman of East African descent, a nurse, who in her off hours enjoyed working the gardens and redecorating and maintaining the house and grounds. Another housed a young man who, in moving, was forced to change high schools just prior to commencing his senior year. Being a neighbor to these individuals, I am aware of the inconveniences they endured so that Broadway investors or Trident investors or whomever now owns the land could profit. In my judgment, the structure which now stands upon that land is far less sturdy than any of the 7 it replaced. That's all.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for open forum? And it looks like no one else has called in. Is there anyone else here in person? All right, thank you for your comments, and that concludes the open forum. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the Joint City Council, Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and Planning Commission work session of May 10th, 2022, the regular Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of June 21st, 2022, and the special Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of July 12th, 2022.
I'll move the approval of the meeting minutes.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Vrees Daniels and seconded by Commissioner Hanson to approve the meeting minutes. Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? We've approved the minutes. Next, we'll move on to approval of the agenda.
I'll move the agenda.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Please note that we will do the budget presentation during that agenda item when we talk, before we do the resolutions. All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the agenda. Next, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Executive Director Palman.
Thank you, Chair Supple. The consent calendar contains several separate items. Tonight, it's actually one item, which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved. No further action on these items is necessary. The one item tonight for your consideration is consideration of a resolution authorizing the use of Hennepin County Affordable Housing Initiative funds in Richfield by the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. And that concludes the consent calendar.
All right, is there a motion to accept the item on the consent calendar?
I will move the consent calendar.
I will second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we have passed the consent calendar items. Next, we'll move on to consider a resolution to acquire redevelopment property at 1710 78th Street East from the City of Richfield. Executive Director Palman.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the board. The property at 1710 78th Street East was purchased by the City of Richfield in 2000 to facilitate construction of the 77th Street underpass. It was unclear at that time exactly how much of the parcel would be needed in that construction. Now that it's been determined, staff is recommending that the remnant parcel be conveyed to the HRA to facilitate redevelopment of the property, along with the properties at 1600 and 1620 78th Street East. One of the primary purposes of a city's HRA is to purchase and sell properties for redevelopment purposes. State statutes have established a more streamlined process for HRAs to act in this capacity versus cities. On July 12th of this year, the City Council approved the conveyance of the property to the HRA for $1. The HRA must now authorize that acquisition. And because it's sometimes asked, I'll just let you know that That $1 conveyance fee is just a contractual requirement, and that is why that's always included. I'll stand for any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions for Executive Director Palman? Commissioner Vrees Daniels?
Yeah, I love the brochure, so maybe commentary, but also question. There's a portion in there, right, that is owned by the Jerry Methwig Trust, and that is the Metro Sales building to the east of the building that was donated, right? But we're marketing them all together, but that portion wasn't donated to the city by that family?
Commissioner Vrees Daniels, yes, that is true. As of now, the trust still owns that property, although they've asked the HRA to take the lead on marketing them, all three properties together. So they'd like to support our vision, and we can, once a developer is interested, we can negotiate alongside them for whether or not that property does get donated to the HRA, whether the HRA is able to purchase it for some reduced price, or whether it's sold to a developer.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, would someone like to make the motion?
Scroll back. I will move the resolution to acquire redevelopment property at 1710 78th Street East from the city of Richfield.
And I will second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the resolution. Next, we'll move on to consider the resolutions approving the proposed 2023 proposed HRA authority budget and tax levy and the 2022 revised HRA authority budget. And then did we want to do the budget presentation first?
Yes, thank you, Chair Supple. I'll just move over and we'll start there.
All right. Thank you, Executive Director Palman.
Okay, is that working? Yep, okay. So thank you, everybody, for letting me present tonight. We're going to talk about the 2022 revised and 2023 proposed HRA budget. And in the subsequent meeting, we'll talk about those same budgets for the EDA. Before we jump in, I just want to call attention also to a couple of guests we have here tonight. We have our finance manager, Kamud Verma, here, and also our HRA accountant, Mert Link. So if we have any questions, you know, they were obviously integral in preparing this budget and are here for support. All right, so I'd like to start. Thank you. By acknowledging your HRA staff. The HRA pays at least 50% of the salary of 9 employees in CD, and that represents over or about half of the total CD employees that work for the HRA. So there's myself, there's Assistant Director Julie Urban. The Economic Development Manager position is listed as a new position here, but really it's a replacement position. For the past several years, under Executive Director Stark, there were 2 redevelopment managers. There was myself as the Planning and Redevelopment Manager, and Julie Urban as the Housing and Redevelopment Manager. So since John has left and I've become Executive Director, Julie remains the Housing and Redevelopment Manager as well as Assistant Director, and that other redevelopment and planning position has been vacant while we've kind of reorganized and looked at what our priorities are. So what we're thinking now is that we do continue to need redevelopment staff help. But also, we'd like this position really to focus on our business needs. That's become a growing need and priority for our community. And so that's why this position is called out as an economic development manager, and why the funding structure for that position is a little bit different than it was when I was the planning and redevelopment manager. Then there are housing specialists, Celeste McDermott and Brian Derwachter. Brian is new to us. He is replacing Kate Aitchison, who has moved upstairs to a marketing position. And we've got our accountant, Mert Link, who I mentioned, administrative assistant, Latanya Dubois, multifamily housing administrator, Lynette Chambers, who I know a number of you have met, and our Section 8 techs, Cindy Veldy and Talisa Parsons. In addition, the HRA pays a small portion of the salaries of our planning staff, our finance folks, and also the city manager. So getting into the meat of it with our 2022 revised and 2023 proposed, the 2022 revised budget does increase significantly, and that's due to several opportunities that we weren't forecasting when we put this together for you last year. So those include the acquisition of the World of Fish property, the rehab funds we've dedicated to Woodlawn Terrace, the demolition of 6501 Penn, the former Bumper to Bumper property, and the first half taxes for that donated property at 1678th Street East. You'll remember that that came in right at the end of the year last year. So before we could get that property declared tax exempt, we did have to pay first half taxes this year. The 2023 proposed budget increases over the 2022 approved by 7.5%. That's about $280,000. And that's primarily due to additional funding or spending out of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That is to support down payment assistance funds for Woodlawn Terrace and the Richfield Flats tax credit project. That Richfield Flats project, you'll remember we pledged about $200,000 for energy efficiency upgrades there. And this is a good time to remind everyone that when we're budgeting, especially with the HRA budget, which is primarily about making investments and spending and taking advantage of opportunities in our community, what we're doing here is we're forecasting. We're taking our best guess at which projects will move forward and which ones maybe won't in the next year. So for instance, if that Richfield Flats project did not move forward, that $200,000 then that makes up most of this increase wouldn't be spent, or perhaps it would be reallocated. So the top half of this chart is showing you it's intended to show you where the HRA budget money comes from. The taxes, obviously that's the amount collected through the levy. Intergovernmental funds, that includes things like CDBG, our Section 8 funding from the federal government, grants, things like that, things that are coming from other government units to us to run our programs. The miscellaneous revenues, that's things like loan repayments, land sales, and then transfers. That's money we're bringing in from other funds like the Housing and Redevelopment Fund. It is also transfers from one fund to another. So it's not always new money that's coming in. It might just be moving money from one program to another, but it's going to show up in these transfers. For what the HRA spends money on, obviously that first column is your staff. Other services and charges, those are things like professional services, legal costs, data processing charges, which went up significantly this year. I'll note communications, professional development, our building rentals, all of those other things that really are almost non-negotiable. We have to pay for our space here. We have to pay for our computers. We have to pay our attorneys. It's those types of things. Capital outlay, that's purchasing land or site improvements related to those purchases. And then transfers. This is the flip side of those transfers in the top, where the transfers are between our funds. This next slide is the levy history. And this is just to show you the amount that the HRA has levied versus the maximum that we could levy. You'll see prior to 2019, actually some of those older years have now fallen off of this chart, but we had maximized the levy. That hasn't been our recommendation for the last several years. There are a couple of reasons behind that. One, we've had the funding that we've needed to do the work that we have, and we have the capacity to do. So those things are matching up right now. The HRA in the past has discussed maximizing the levy again, but we've been at capacity for our staffing level, and we can't we can't actually fit any more staff in our space once we fill all of our positions that are vacant right now. Second, we've tried to look at the levies, the city levy, even the school board levy, the HRA levy, and EDA holistically, and take into account what those increases mean for individual property owners. With the increased pressure on the city budget right now, and the increases in people's property values, we have held off on larger increases to the HRA levy. But there's going to be a need to revisit that. And I had hoped to be able to talk to you more about that this year with the TIF management plan in hand. Unfortunately, there were several things that were delayed, and the audit findings were delayed by several months. And so we don't have that TIF management plan yet. And that's going to inform a lot of our decisions going forward and really figure out where to set that levy to support the programs that are the highest priorities for you in the next few years. So that TIF management plan should be here any day. And then we'll start having those discussions with you about how to spend that pooled TIF. And we'll have a really good look at what it's going to mean for our administrative dollars too, and what we'll need for staffing for that. So just to cover some 2022 highlights and what we've been working on this year and the factors that are going into the preparation of this budget. Like many divisions in the city, we've experienced significant turnover. While that obviously represents some opportunities for us, it's also a lot of work, particularly in this economic climate, to hire and onboard folks. And that the work in the meantime, the work that's coming in Richfield has not slowed down. So that's really been a challenge for all departments, but us included. And I do want to emphasize that your HRA staff is a passionate and talented and hard-working group of people, and they want to do a good job. And so we want to be able to take in these new employees and really take care of them, give them the training they need, make sure that they're part of the team, that they feel like they're part of the team, that they feel valued. And that takes time. It takes an investment, but we think it's really worth it. There have been a lot of exciting things happening in preparation for the future. As you know, longtime business owner Ted Levin offered the World of Fish building to the HRA, seeing what was happening in that quarter of the city, understanding the excitement around there. He thought that that would be a wise way to close down his long lasting business in Richfield. Then we had the generous donation of the EcoSmart property at 1600 78th, and the HRA worked with the Council and Planning Commission on visioning and marketing, which you saw tonight. So we'll be looking to capitalize on that at the 77th Street Tunnel. And very soon, the buildings at 6501 Penn Avenue will be down. That's been a very, very complex demolition and utility project. One that really exemplifies why the HRA needs to get involved in some of these properties. This demolition is going to end up costing in the neighborhood of $250,000. And for a private developer to come in and be able to take that on top of any project redevelopment costs, really, it would not be possible. So this is a great example of where the HRA should really be stepping in to help. Then we've got funding committed to Woodlawn Terrace, which I mentioned. You'll recall that the tenants purchased the park and formed a cooperative, and the HRA is pledging funding for utility work as well as rehab and demolition costs. And then, like I mentioned, we're working with our financial consultants at Ellers to prepare our TIF management plan that will help us to fully utilize our pooled TIF, which is going to amount to several millions of dollars. We're also managing several exciting potential projects. Again, Richfield Flats, MICC's project, Beacon Interfaith's proposed project here at Portland and 66, the American Legion Veterans Village, and the Hub. And then we're managing several ongoing projects the Riley, the Raya, and RF64, all the R's, are completed or nearly completed. And then the Linview and the 101 66th Street projects either are under construction or are very close to permits. Finally, we've continued to administer our Section 8 program really well. We serve about 300 households every year. We also administer our single-family programs. There are some things to note in our budget there. In the 2022 revised budget, we're moving $85,000 of new home funds over to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to fund more down payment and first-time home buyer loans. And then also, you'll recall, at the end of 2021, we received $640,000 in sales proceeds from the RF64 project, where they are unable to make the affordability work in the ownership portion of that project. So we got $640,000 in proceeds, and we're using those funds for affordability elsewhere in the community. So things like our first-time home buyer program, and also affordable ownership through the land trust. And then we continue to provide funding and financial and remodeling programs through CEE, our architectural consultation project program, the Fix Up Fund, our remodeling advisor, and home improvement loans. And then not insignificantly, administering 14 active TIF districts. So for 2023, I know you're hearing this from me and from us a lot, but the staff that does this work is arguably your most important asset. And so we need to hire and invest in the wonderful people that get that work done. And so that's going to continue to be our focus in 2023. We have 2 brand new hires right now. We have a position that closed today. So we have a lot of people that we really need to focus on getting fully onboarded. There have been significant increases in IT charges for 2023 as the city works to modernize our software and not even fully modernize, but just come closer to being up to date. Our Section 8 IT charges, for instance, jumped 40% this year. So increases were really large. The Richfield Rediscovered program, in the 2022 revised budget, we reduced the funding for that program, and staff is working on revised guidelines that will help that program advance demonstration projects, envelope pushing projects in terms of density, energy efficiency, accessibility. Those things that you've indicated are really your priorities. And in 2023, they'll be funding for 2 of those projects. The Woodlawn Terrace project, they'll be in 2023, there'll be up to $120,000 in down payment assistance, recognizing the importance of manufactured housing in Richfield's landscape of affordable options. Our budget also includes funds for an apartment navigator. That idea has been on hold with COVID, but it stemmed from our Strengthening Richfield Apartment Communities work. And it's a position that's intended to help build relationships and connections with our apartment residents, make sure that they know what resources are available, and work with them to connect to those. In 2022, we're working on that TIF management plan, and in 2023, we expect to find some exciting funding opportunities and priorities to work on. And then we'll continue our work with a number of projects, MWF, Beacon, MICC, our standard Section 8 single-family housing programs, kind of our bread and butter. So moving on to our future considerations and need. There are a lot of projects and initiatives to be really excited about. That large amount of money in pooled TIF is exciting. It's also going to be a challenge. We're going to have a deadline to spend that money, and that actually can be hard work. So really exciting, but a lot of work. Many development opportunities to look forward to, and a number of affordable and unique projects. I think that the staff is really energized about the Veterans Village, Beacon's proposal, and MICC. Challenges, as some of those larger TIF districts start to decertify, The HRA funding is going to become more difficult, like I mentioned. Right now, those large districts pay a lot of money into the Housing and Redevelopment Fund. That's what we're looking to spend. And those fund our programs. They fund qualified land purchases, things like that. The districts can also pay staff costs related to administering that. Just carrying out that work. So if we're purchasing a property, it can pay for our time to do that. It can pay for our legal costs. It can pay for certain site improvements immediately after purchase, things like that. Now, as those districts decertify, we'll both have less money to spend and less money to administer the programs. And so you're going to be looking at if you have enough money to keep all of these programs active, and if you have enough money to fund the staff that run them. So the TIF management plan is what's going to help us to come up with a path forward. And then, again, staff capacity, hiring, training, retention, succession planning. I think, the city's experience, city and HRA have experienced a lot of institutional knowledge loss. And we haven't always had great succession plans in place. And that's really become obvious in these last couple of years. And so I think it's imperative that those of us at the management level make that a priority so that we have these continuity plans. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions from you.
Thank you for a very comprehensive report, and also thank you to Ms. Link and Ms. Verma for all the work that you've put into it. I know that you all both have done a lot for this. Do we have any questions for staff or comments? Commissioner Vries-Daniels?
Thank you. And you answered a couple of most of my questions that I sent you. So thank you. I appreciate that. Comments and questions are probably going to be intertwined for me. So I think, one, the investing in staff, capacity, hire, training, I think that's well worth the money. I think when you invest in your staff, they then invest in the city. So I love to see that we're growing that time and investment into the staff because I think that's really beneficial. As far as timelines go, because I think that TIF management plan is super vital to kind of understanding the bigger picture, can our approval of this budget wait until that's ready? What's our timeline for needing to approve this to send this off?
Well, there is a deadline to approve the levy after, and Kamud can correct me if I'm wrong on this date. I believe it's September 13th, that we have to approve the levy. After that, the levy amount. After that time, we can bring the budget down, but we could not raise the budget. And this is a preliminary look at the budget. It's approval of those levy rates, but we do bring the budget back for final consideration at the end of the year. That's generally, there generally have not been big changes. Yeah, and I am not sure by the time we get that TIF management plan if we will have had enough time to sit down with you to have a comprehensive plan. I would hope that we would have that in place and have a good idea of where we're headed by 2023 revised.
So then on top of that, if we were to not raise the taxes by 4%, which is $25,000 in additional funds and a small portion of the total budget for 2023. But I hear kind of maybe what you're getting at, which is in 2026, we may need to be going more. And so is this a stepping stone to get us there so it's not such a shock to the community?
That's a good question. I think that the stepping stone idea is more of what we had in mind. To be honest, I think that this year we had hoped to step a little bigger. We had, but with the pressure on the city budget, we just don't think that that's wise. If we were to look at keeping the budget or the tax levy flat and trying to cut that $25,000 to $30,000 out of each budget. It's tricky in the HRA because a lot of the funding for things you see in that budget are not actually from that general levy. They're from things like the Housing and Redevelopment Fund and other funds that we have. So we would have to look at expenses that are not TIF eligible, because why would you cut those when you have TIF available? So we would look, honestly, probably at either delaying the hiring of that economic development position, or things like training, things like the apartment navigator, things that are going to be paid for with general fund dollars.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Hanson.
Well, the 4% increase in the levy, just for the benefit of our viewing audience, kind of a ballpark figure, what would be the impact on like a typical Richfield home?
Oh, gosh. I do not have that offhand. Kumud, do you know what the... Okay. Okay.
Okay, that
Maybe we
sounds
can
good.
get to you before we actually vote. Would that be okay? That's going to be a pretty small, just for a ballpark. The increase in the levy is approximately $30,000, I believe. Richfield has, let's see, population now is about 39,000. In terms of parcels, I want to say we're in the neighborhood of 10,000, but that might be a number I plucked out of the air. So it's a relatively small increase.
And kind of looking at the numbers, I was assuming it probably would be a small number. I just know that I think a lot of times the residents out there, that's kind of like
Sure.
that bottom line information that they always, want to have at hand. So
Sure.
that's why I wanted to ask. You mentioned about hiring. I know we hear about in the economic world as a whole that sometimes there's hiring challenges. How does it look for hiring professionals in like community development?
It has been a significant challenge. We have wound up with, I think, some excellent hires and some great new staff, but our applicant pools are much smaller. We're keeping our positions open. We're doing a lot more active recruiting through our own professional networks. But, for example, it's kind of a game of musical chairs with the community development professionals. This is just an example with our planning position. So the planner at the city of Hopkins took the community development job at the city of White Bear Lake. Our planner went to Hopkins, and now White Bear Lake's planner has come to Richfield. And so it's shuffling of people as opposed to really having new people to bring into the market, and especially hiring at these higher level positions, we're having a lot of challenges.
Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Kumud, would you like to come up here? Or?
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, everyone. I just want to correct the date that, and the correct date is that cities must adopt all the proposed levies by September 30th, 2022. And the 4% HRA levy increase as compared to the last year, it would be an additional $26,000. Be using the 39.
I'm sorry, we do not have that calculation, Commissioner Hanson.
All right, that's fine.
So on September 13th, I know the city council is going to be approving budgets and tax levies at that council meeting. Is that when the housing trust fund budget also gets approved? Is that part of that whole package, or?
Yes, I believe that goes before them. Yes, that goes at the same time.
Okay, thank you. So I was very excited to see that we are going to be filling the economic development manager position, because I think that is a critical component to our department. And I was also very happy with the fact that you're spending time on the training and the onboarding and the succession planning, because I think that internal infrastructure is really important to having a successful department. So kudos to you all for doing that, as well as the TIF plan. I think doing that long-term planning and thinking ahead is going to be critical for how we use our resources. Because whenever I read through all these budgets, I'm always impressed with the thinking that's gone into it and the planning and leveraging resources. And so I continue to be impressed by that. So thank you. And then I know it was a really exciting time when we found out we can get all the new software and like upgrade like for the planning and different things that we can use that for, because that's going to make it much easier. And I hadn't realized about the apartment navigator, so I'm interested to hear more about that. So I don't have any additional questions other than I'm looking forward to hearing more about as things go along as the plans. Are there any additional comments or questions? All right, so that was the budget presentation. The item on our agenda now is to consider the resolutions approving the proposed 2023 HRA budget and tax levy and the 2022 revised HRA budget. Did you have anything additional to say about that?
Chair Supple, I do not. The staff report is pretty self-explanatory. We are required by statute to approve these resolutions and to do so by September 30th. So that is what is before you today.
I wanted to add one comment, because I know as I was reading through this, I looked at it and I saw that we have a budget of several $1 million, but then the tax levy talks about the $572,000. And so for the people that are listening in the audience, you need to remember that that's for the general fund, and we had several different funds that make up the whole budget. So the tax levy has to do with the general fund money. It does not have to do with like money coming in from TIF and other things. So that in case anybody's looking at the numbers and wondering why there's this wide difference in the numbers, that's why. So any other questions, or would someone like to move the item?
I would move that we table this item until the September, let me get the date right, December 19th, September 19th meeting, to allow some more time to find out what that per household cost and some other things are. Sounds like that still allows us time to approve.
Commissioner Rees-Daniels, it does. We certainly can table it. What were the other things? We can certainly find that calculation for you, but what were the other things that you would want looked into? We will not have the TIP management plan or have decisions made related to that by then.
Perfect. So if the TIF isn't going to be ready, I think that's kind of a main piece. And I want to make sure that because it is increase in taxes, that we are really looking at it and looking at our due diligence. Is it the right amount? Is it too small? Is it too little? Just getting this budget on Friday and knowing we have a little bit more time. I would love to just understand what that is. I get it's a small amount to some people, but I think any increase in taxes, knowing all the taxes are increasing for everybody, it's important that we just do our due diligence. So that would be my motion.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Just a quick question. So tabling and delaying till September wouldn't cause any adverse effect on the whole process?
I'm going to ask Finance Manager Verma and CD Accountant Link, since they have more experience here.
Specifically,
I will mention that we did find a number. It isn't HRA specific, but the number proposed, the 2023 proposed levy, and that's the whole levy, would be a $13.50 per month on city property. Am I reading that right? Yep, $13.50 per month. And that is the entire levy together. So that's not the HRA alone.
But that's not the increase, or are you talking the city levy plus the?
The city plus.
So I have a question about timing. The HRA meeting is after the city council meeting. Does the HRA budget and the EDA budget have to be approved for the city council to vote on it? Is that a component?
The city council is only voting on, the only part that they are voting on in relation to your budget is actually the Affordable Housing Trust Fund portion of the budget. They don't vote on the HRA budget, even as a component unit. Without the HRA attorney here, I really don't have a good answer to this question since we haven't had it happen before.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will say that what you're approving tonight are resolutions that would set the max levy for the HRA. So if you would come back and we would have new information and you would decide to lower the levy, you could still do that after September 30th. You just can't raise it after September 30th.
Thank you. I will take back my motion then.
Okay,
That's helpful.
all right. And so that motion has been withdrawn. Is there a further motion?
All right, I will make a motion to adopt the attached resolutions approving the 2023 proposed Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget and tax levy and 2022 revised Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget.
All right, and I will second that. So it's been moved by Commissioner Hanson and seconded by Commissioner Supple to adopt the attached resolutions. Discussion? I do think it's important to note that we can reduce it, so if we end up getting that information back and deciding that we can reduce it, we still have time to reduce it. We just simply can't raise it beyond what it's currently at.
Yeah, I think that option to reduce it made me a little more comfortable with moving forward with the motion at this point. Normally, I would like that information of, what would be the impact on the typical house in Richfield, because, kind of when it gets to the bottom line, cut to the chase, that's, what people always really want to know. And so I do think that's important information. But knowing we have that flexibility to lower, I guess I'm comfortable, and knowing that it's going to be a small amount just with the numbers that are presented in a general sense tonight, I'm comfortable with moving ahead.
And I do support the fact that we haven't been levying the maximum if we don't need the money for that, because there's a lot of pressure in other forms of tax increases for homeowners. So if we're only taking what we need, that's important. I don't think maximizing just to be maximizing is prudent. I think it's good that we're just levying what we need and we're not filling out the maximum possible authority.
And I too would commend the staff for doing that, not not just filling up the tank just because it would be available, but approaching it from a very, I think, responsible means of understanding the impact of taxes on people.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to adopt the attached resolutions. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've adopted the attached resolutions and have set the levy. Going on to item 6, it's HRA discussion items. Are there any items that anyone would like to discuss?
I was going to ask about 6501 Penn and when it's coming down, so you've already answered that, hopefully soon. It's been a while, so I'm excited to see that come down. I understand it's been complicated, so thank you for answering that before.
I had an additional question on that. Will it be down before PennFest? Because I know there was safety concerns about having it under demolition during PennFest.
Sure, Sybil, that has been our goal the whole time. My understanding is that demolition will start on the 25th. That's the last date that I heard. There will be some sodding and grass work that is not done, so that will be fenced, but the building will be down, the fill will be in, and it will be fenced off for PennFest. And the thing that really held us up, well, there have been a number of things along the line that have held us up, but the latest is the timing needed to fabricate the pipe that will be installed leading out to 65th Street, and that took longer, as everything does these days, than we were hoping for.
So I had heard there was something with like protection of groundwater, and so that's what it is to make sure the pipe, make sure nothing seeps into our groundwater
Yes.
system.
Yes.
All right, other discussion items? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report.
Chair Supple, I don't have a report for tonight.
All right, and then we can move on to claims.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, we've approved the claims. Seeing that we have no further business, we stand adjourned. And in about 30 seconds, we will start the EDA meeting, the Economic Development Authority, but we'll give people a second to flip over to their other agendas. Okay, thank you. All right. So at this point, I'm going to call to order the Economic Development Authority meeting of August 15th, 2022. It is 7:52 p.m. And our first order of business, since we haven't had an EDA meeting since Commissioner Hanson joined us, is to give Commissioner Hanson the oath of office. So do you guys want to do it where you're sitting or go over to the... Okay, cool.
Okay. All right. So second to go around. All right. Hopefully we'll do the good this time.
All right.
Okay. So repeat after me. I, Gordon Hanson,
I, Gordon Hanson,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota
and the Charter and ordinances of the City of Richfield,
and the Charter and ordinances of the City of Richfield,
and that I will faithfully execute and discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully execute and discharge the duties
of the office of EDA Commissioner
of the Office of EDA Commissioner
of the Economic Development Authority
of the Economic Development Authority
of the City of Richfield,
of the City of Richfield,
according to the law
according to the law
and to the best of my ability
and to the best of my ability
and understanding, so help me God.
and understanding, so help me God.
All right. Well, thank you and welcome to the EDA.
Thank you.
Did you want to say anything?
Pardon me?
Did you want to make a speech or say anything?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
But it's great to be here. This will be a very interesting capacity in which to serve.
Yes, the EDA is something that has a lot of potential for growth, so it'll be interesting as the time goes along. All right, well, next we have open forum. As we said earlier, each speaker is asked to keep their comment period to 3 minutes to allow sufficient time for others. Comments are to be an opportunity to address the EDA. Please refer to the EDA agenda and minutes webpage for additional ways to submit comments. You may also call 612-861-9764 or email ldubois@richfieldmin.gov with questions. So you can call into the open forum by dialing 1-415-655-0001. use the webinar access code of 2461-947-9457 and a password 1234. Executive Director Paleman, has anyone sent comments ahead of time?
Chair Supple, we did not receive any comments.
All right, and it does not look like anybody has called in. Is there anyone here in the audience that wishes to comment? All right, we'll wait just a minute in case someone wants to call in. All right, it does not look like anyone else is calling in, so we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the regular EDA meeting of February 23rd, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any questions or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've approved the minutes. Next, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Again, we're going to do the budget presentation before we move on to considering the resolutions. Any other comments or questions? All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we've approved the agenda. So I'll turn it over to Executive Director Paleman for the presentation of the EDA budget. Thank you.
Thank you, President Supple, members of the board. The EDA's budget is a lot simpler than the HRA budget. Part of that is because of funding, but part of it is also because we're really working on building up our EDA. It's a lot newer in its formation, and so this should be pretty quick. The EDA has not really had dedicated staff in the past. It's been facilitated through help from several people spending small portions of their time on this work. The big change for this budget is that new economic development manager position, and that they're going to spend a significant amount of time on building up these building-focused programs. In addition, the EDA pays a small portion of my salary, the housing specialist, Celeste McDermott and Brian Durochter, accountant Mart Link, administrative assistant Latanya Dubois, and multifamily housing administrator Lynette Chambers, and then assistant planner Nellie Jerome. And there was a question before the meeting about specifically what our assistant planner does to help the EDA. And our planning staff actually helps in the EDA and the HRA. There are a lot of zoning questions when a new business comes in and wants to operate. And so they're called into a lot of those early meetings. It's not really planning work yet. It's pre-application planning stuff. And if you actually take a look at the community development city portion of the budget, you'll see that our planning application fees do not bring in that much money. It's about, we estimate we're budgeting for about $26,000 next year. We're in that neighborhood. We tend to be $24,000 to $28,000, and that it doesn't even come close to covering the costs of those planners. And so in meetings like this, where we really are working on economic development and there's funding available from the EDA, that's what we're using there. Our planners also do plan reviews for things like transformation, home loans, and other loan projects or building projects that come in. And so that's what that's about. So 2022 revised budget for the EDA changes just slightly. The kids at home budget in this in the revised is decreasing. And the reason for that is that the ongoing pandemic has just made that program a challenge, because the really wonderful thing about that program is the community that it builds, and having those in-person meetings and that opportunity to build community and relationships has really suffered during the pandemic. So enrollment is currently down. But we've bumped that back up for 2023 and actually put a little bit of extra money in there to really work on recruitment and making those meetings special and meaningful for our participants. So that's the change there. The 2022 Small Business Revolving Loan Program also remained on its COVID hiatus as we've worked to fill vacant positions. That has taken a back seat. And that too, again, we hope to get off the ground in 2023 with our economic development manager leading the charge on that. Those reductions in the budget, however, are kind of eaten up by this new economic development manager position. And that represents the budget increase that you see in the proposed 2023 budget as well. So the proposed levy for the EDA is also 4%. Few budget notes on the EDA. Just want to remind you of the programs that the EDA funds. It's the Kids at Home program that I mentioned, Transformation Home Loans, our apartment rehab loan and grant programs, that business development, and then also our contract with Open to Business, which provides services to people looking to open or expand their business in Richfield. And, you know, we have had a very high demand, continued high demand for our business energy efficiency business grants. That's been very successful. Transformation Home Loan Program, we're increasing the budget in that for 2022 revised to cover some projects that were actually committed in 2021 but have taken longer to complete. And so billing was coming in this year. And thus far in 2022, we've awarded one loan under the apartment remodeling program. It's a $7,500, or that was $8,500 in that neighborhood for a single family rental. And if you remember, that's our pilot program where we expanded to the single and two family. And then I'll just leave it with a note that, you know, it's our hope that by hiring an experienced economic development professional, that we're really going to be able to provide greater assistance to our business community and help and grow these new commercial investments in places like Richfield's downtown and some of our other commercial corridors. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the EDA budget.
Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Freeze-Daniels.
No questions, thank you, Chair. No questions, but comments. Thank you for the explanation about planning. As I was looking at the EDA programs, I wasn't making the connection, but that makes total sense, so thank you. And same as the HRA, looking at what that cost is per household. And I'm going to be clear, like, it's not that I don't think the money is well spent, because I 100%, if we gave you millions and millions and millions of dollars, it would be very well spent. It's just what can the community afford to do. So I just want to be clear about that. So I will move forward with it, but I also want to make sure that we understand what the EDA increase is too for people. So thank you.
Yes, and I think that's an excellent point. I'm not sure why we wouldn't have included it in previous reports, but it did not click in my mind. So absolutely, and we'll include that going forward.
All right, Commissioner Hanson.
Well, I don't have questions either, but I will say that I am excited about the hiring of the economic development manager. I think it's so important that we kind of have this vibrant kind of commercial and business community here in Richfield. And I think having a person dedicated to that specifically will be really key in achieving that goal. A lot of competition throughout the Twin Cities in that sector. And so we want someone who's going to promote and market Richfield to be the great community that we are.
Yes, agree.
I would echo that sentiment. I do think this is a really important position, that economic development manager position, because being that we're landlocked, we have very few places we can do development, and we do have some possibilities right now, so it's kind of a once-in-a-generation chance. I mean, it took 30 years to get the tunnel going through on 77th Street, and now there's like a block of land, and there's the Cedar Corridor, there's Penn, there's 66th Street, there's all different places, and I'm going to get in trouble when I'm listing things because I'll leave something out. But I just think that there's a lot of possibility here, and I really want to make sure that we use that time and use those resources well. So thank you for all your work. And again, thank you to Ms. Verma and Ms. Link for all their work on developing these budgets.
And I'll just throw out there too, there's the possibility of, Bloomington's in the running for the World's Fair. And that would be really exciting for this area. And it would be great to have an economic development person on board to help us really take advantage of all the people that might be here. And yeah, exciting opportunities.
All right, any further questions for Executive Director Palman? All right, would someone like to move the adoption?
Well, I will make a motion to adopt the attached resolutions approving the 2023 proposed Economic Development Authority budget and tax levy and 2022 revised Economic Development Authority budget.
And I'll second that. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we've adopted the resolution. Next, we'll move on to EDA discussion items. Are there items that people would like to talk about? I want to throw one out there, and it was sparked by something Commissioner Hansen said at a work session back a couple months ago. We talk about affordable housing, but I think we also need to talk about affordable business places. And I know there's been concern when I've talked to people. When we redevelop the hub, we have a lot of small businesses there that won't necessarily be able to afford if we go to really high prices and new things. And so what can we do to make sure we have affordable business places so that we're not pushing our small businesses out? Because we have a lot of really key and vibrant small businesses, but we don't want to push them out of Richfield because there's no place for them to go. And so I don't expect an answer right now, but I do think we need to be thinking about how can we have affordable spaces for businesses as well. And that would be my soapbox for today. All right, Commissioner Hansen.
And I would echo those sentiments. I've talked about this issue a number of times. I really think the small businesses are important to the community because they have a unique identity and they kind of help build the identity and the culture of the community as well. And I know that's always been one of the challenges. Whenever there's a new development, it seems like a lot of times the only people who can afford it, only businesses that can afford it, are like the big national names. And then when you end up with only the big national chains, I mean, we look like every place else. We look like Maple Grove, Woodbury, Apple Valley, or even Seattle, Pittsburgh, and Dallas. It's like, there's certainly a place for those big national chains, and they're going to be here, and we welcome them here. But I think there really needs to be a place at the table for the small businesses, the ones that we currently have, and hopefully to make this community more attractive to some new entrants in that sector.
All right, Executive Director Palin.
Thank you, President Sebel, members of the board. I'm glad to hear this because we've been trying to put together kind of a basic work plan and what we really want this economic development manager to focus on. And one of those priorities for us is affordable commercial. We have been in talks with at least one developer trying to figure out, is there a way to pilot this? Is there a way for the EDA to hold a second mortgage to buy down rents for a certain portion or a certain number of years? So we are working on it. I also know there's during the pandemic, there was a Hennepin County working group that was studying this exact issue. And so one of the things that we'd like an economic development manager to do is go out and figure out, has anyone piloted these programs? What's working? Because we agree this is a place where money would be well spent.
All right, are there any other items for discussion? All right, then we'll move on to the Executive Director's report.
President Sebel, I do not have a report for tonight.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll move on to claims.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? and we've approved the claims. We have no further business on our agenda, so we stand adjourned. Thank you.